I'm your host, Eric Eisenberg. Welcome to Hero Blend number 26. This week, we saw some major developments in the world of Marvel Comics with a new female Thor introduced and Sam Wilson announced as the brand new Captain America. How will this affect the world of comic book movies? Stay tuned and find out. Welcome back, everyone. Helping me sort through all this Marvel Comics madness this week is none other than our very own Sean O'Connell from Cinema Blend. How's it going, man?
I'm overwhelmed, dude. There's a lot to process lately, and it seems like Marvel's getting a jump on Comic-Con.
This is, just in fact that we're a week before Comic-Con, the fact that we're getting all of these big announcements about a female Thor and Sam Wilson being the new Captain America, it is kind of amazing that it's all coming now, and we can only expect more next week.
And none of this stuff is happening until October or November, right?
Yeah, it's all kind of further down the line. They're just making these announcements now and kind of getting the public ready for it.
Okay, yeah, because then I wondered what the reason was. I guess it's because it's tied to Comic-Con, and we might get to see some concept art or artwork at some other comic panels in San Diego, and this is just a way for them to it's sort of Marvel throwing down the gauntlet and reminding people they're still the big dog, and their announcements matter, because we've cranked out a lot of coverage for these announcements.
That's true, and not only that, it's important to remember, obviously, we mostly talk about comic book movies, we talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe going on. It's important to remember that these are originating in the comics, and it's nice to have these kind of huge announcements that kind of get everybody talking about this kind of stuff when it's not in a when it's not packaged in a blockbuster fashion. But that's kind of my first question. When you first heard both of these announcements, what were your kind of reactions to it? Were you surprised? What do you think the angle is here?
I wasn't surprised, because in the comics, you're open to so many major changes. We've seen characters die, come back, switching genres, switching races, changing who wears the costume. I think a lot of this stuff has been done. What surprised me the most is how these announcements and these changes synced up with things that we've been seeing happening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Okay, how do you mean?
Well, they introduce the Falcon in the Captain America movies, and
sure.
and maybe that was, and they introduced the Winter Soldier. And maybe those were always going to be the intention of where to bring the Captain America story to. But then it's interesting that Sam Wilson becomes such a major part of the Captain America books, and then the Winter Soldier looks like he's a part of this new Avengers team that's part of this Avengers now. Mm-hmm. We hear that Ant-Man and Doctor Strange are projects that Kevin Feige has been backing for a long time now. Coincidentally, Ant-Man and Doctor Strange are part of that team. Would they always have been? I'm not sure, but there are definite ways that these changes and the books are lining up with what I think could happen. It's almost like Marvel's just giving themselves a foundation of, if we have to go this way. If Chris Evans doesn't stay on as Steve Rogers, mm-hmm. we now have a precedent, that we did switch somewhere, that there's a new Captain America. And a lot of those changes seem like Chris Hemsworth isn't going to stick around forever. We could bring in a female Thor. It's long-term planning, because I think the books have to inform the movies and vice versa.
Well, I think that is definitely part of it. As you mentioned, comic book history is filled with all these kinds of things where characters die and they come back and people take on the name. It was just a couple years ago that we first saw James Bucky Barnes taking on the Captain America title. And honestly, if that hadn't happened a couple years ago, it might be happening now, just because you kind of, again, what you said, you kind of want to get the movie audience ready for these kind of big transitions, which are inevitable. But in the same time, I kind of also view the entire situation as kind of a reversal. You have, obviously, the movies are going to be inspired by the comics. They're going to be taking kind of lead from where those started. But you also, the way I'm thinking about this is that the popularity of these movies is not just comic book nerds. This is reaching out to all demographics, women, men, all different races. It's not, so the fact that they're kind of making these kind of changes in comic books kind of suggests to me that they're taking this broad, huge appeal that they're getting from blockbuster movies and looking to move it towards the comics. They are trying to appeal to a more female demographic with a female Thor, possibly a African American, or demographic with the new Captain America. Do you think that's has to be part of their plan, no?
Absolutely. It's Marvel reflecting the sign of the times and changing with the culture. I think that's pretty exciting. And it makes me wonder how we would react. It was really funny. Like, we have a black Captain America, and it never really crossed my mind that that's a big deal. We've had comments, underneath our articles to say to some people it's a really big deal. But as you're saying that, I'm thinking ahead to the icons on the other side, Superman and Batman. Mm-hmm. If there was a black Superman or a female Batman, it would seem so abnormal to me. Just because of what we've had established for all these years. But hearing that there's a black Captain America or a female Thor, those don't seem as drastic to me, and I wonder why.
Well, I think part of that just may be the difference between DC and Marvel. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Superman, there really hasn't been another Superman. We really know Bruce Wayne as Batman. Like, Marvel has a tendency to change these kinds of things up a bit more often than DC. I think that's probably why it's a bit more throttling. Also, though, you also have to realize that Batman and Superman exist on a completely different pop culture level than characters like Captain America and Thor. So you can kind of play around with that. There's a little bit more freedom there just for that reason alone. But at the same time, I do understand the controversy. But to those people who are complaining, which I don't necessarily get, because, you have a female Thor and Sam Wilson's Captain America. All you're doing is really opening up possible new storylines that you could never do before with the characters that were. And whether it's going to work, whether it's not, we have no idea at this point. But I can't fault it for being an interesting launching point. But I think the bigger issue, and the reason why I really don't understand why people are complaining, is that it goes back to what you're saying. These things are temporary. There's no way that Sam Wilson is going to forever be Captain America. There's no way that Thor is going to still be a woman in 8 years from now. Marvel's going to change these things back. I think this is just a interesting creative choice for the now, and I'm personally excited for it.
I absolutely agree that they're experiments. And it's much easier to experiment in the books than it is in these movies, which take forever to film. Yes. The only way I disagree with you is if one of these ideas catches fire. If there's a female Thor and fans love it, if the storyline is so creative that they want to stay with it, if Sam Wilson as the new Captain America opens up so many doors that it becomes a huge movement, it's possible. I think fans really want what they're used to, and I think that these will be experiments that last for a short amount of time and maybe longer than we expect. But it will be interesting to see what kind of impact they have on the pop culture in general, because the Marvel brand is so strong right now.
It's true, and and obviously you're right. Success completely dictates everything. If female Thor ends up selling better than Thor comics ever did before, who knows? Maybe Thor 3 will introduce a female Thor. You can't really count those things out, because obviously money drives this entire industry, and that's the way it's always going to be. At the same time, though, it goes back to the Batman-Superman thing where you said, Steve Rogers is Captain America. He always is Captain America. The way the storyline works out is that he's lost the super soldier serum, which is why Sam Wilson has to take over. Right. But, you're telling me that you can't get the super soldier serum back? You have time travel, you have all these other elements. The door is always open for that kind of thing. So, basically...
All it proves to me is how brilliant Marvel is to think as long-term as they think. We think Phase 3 and maybe Phase 4. I think they're thinking Phase 15 and 16, and I'm so impressed by it.
No, Kevin Feige has gone on the record saying that he has plans through 2028, which is insane, but also very, very cool. But let's also let's briefly touch on the real possibilities that female Thor and Sam Wilson Captain America could actually appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let's start with Sam Wilson, because this is a character that we have seen introduced, but at the same time there are a few kind of roadblocks standing his way. You'd agree, yeah?
I do, yeah. Because I'd say there's two people ahead of him. There's Evans and Steve Rogers staying on board in the role. And there's Bucky Barnes, who Sebastian Stan, we've talked about the fact he has a 9-picture deal. You wouldn't sign him to that length of time unless you plan to use him. And that could be one of the instances where between now and Cap 3 or Avengers 3, if the character in the comics were to catch fire and become this cultural phenomena, they might rewrite. And maybe Sebastian Stan doesn't become the significant part that they wanted him to play. It's just having Anthony Mackie signed and having him in place, and you've introduced him already, the ability to be fluid and to switch. I mean, I think the same thing for Thor 3. Like, we've left Thor in a place where he's almost, he hasn't turned his back on Asgard, but he's sort of said, I'm going to London. And so many things can change, but they could really rewrite and introduce those concepts. They're giving themselves those possibilities, unlike some of these other superhero franchises that seem to have to react and then, you know, map out their universe based on what has happened, and that never really, or doesn't work quite as well.
Sure. Well, the only thing, I mean, and obviously, and you're right in the sense that this is a fluid process. I mean, there are Marvel contracts out there that are like that Marvel just may never pick up on. I mean, you have like, oh God, I'm of course blanking on his name. Tim Blake Nelson from The Incredible Hulk, who was the leader in the end of that movie. But has that ever happened? He's contractually signed, but whether that actually happened, probably not, considering he's Mole Man now in the Fantastic Four. But I think a larger issue that should be considered, specifically in terms of Sam Wilson, is that, do you necessarily want him to become Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? If not only because it may end up shortchanging the history of Falcon. Because Falcon is the character that has been around for decades. Yes, closely affiliated with Captain America. But, I mean, is it not a little unfair to not just let Sam Wilson exist as Falcon and not just be Captain America from the get-go?
Yeah, I agree that's unfair. And one of the things I really liked a lot about the Winter Soldier was their dynamic together. And I'd hate to lose that after just half of a movie. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah. But we're running into a problem with these Marvel films, too, where when you get to an Avengers film, there's so many characters that we're going to want to see on screen. I just think Avengers Age of Ultron has a lot of people to juggle. Right. And in the first Avengers, we saw people like Hawkeye get shortchanged. How much screen time are some of the major guys, you know, Iron Man, Thor, they need time, and we keep introducing new people, so that's a problem to sort of deal with going forward also.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, the fact that there's always going to be an influx of a new amount of characters, that's always going to be something, but eventually you kind of got to filter the old ones out, introduce new ones. It's definitely got part of a fluid process, which we've been talking about.
West Coast Avengers, West Coast.
That's definitely a way to diversify. I think that'd be fantastic. Sean, we're running out of time, so let me get your final thoughts on this. You have new Captain America, new Thor, possible new direction for Marvel Cinematic Universe. Where are you thinking with this?
Possible, for sure. Again, I'm impressed at Marvel's ability to think long-term and to give themselves the options. I don't think it's going to affect the movies immediately, but I think that if the books turn out to be as successful as Marvel hopes they will be, then yes, then Marvel now has the option to go in those directions. But I think Marvel Cinematic Universe has a pretty concrete plan of where they want to go and what direction they want to go. And unless these books really catch fire, it's not going to shake up what Feige already thinks he wants to do.
That's true. I mean, and you can't argue with, I mean, as mentioned, they have the plan already set out. They already have a very good idea of what they want. If they don't have a huge motivation to change, I can't imagine that they would. At the same time, I like the idea of a female Thor and Sam Wilson as Captain America. So, you know what? Maybe years and years down the line, somehow that could happen. I don't know. Sean, thank you so much for, again, appearing on the show with me. And hopefully I'll see you again soon. And I'll see you again next week at Comic-Con.
Yay! Can't wait, man. Looking forward to it.